Uh-oh, no, 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 no. She fighting.
I'm his baby mama, not her. And you know it's wrong. Don't y'all touch me. This is my son. You know what you did? It was wrong. You were wrong. I don't want to hear it. They know where the fuck to go. You know what? The woman in me.
It was supposed to be a full room full of people in black trying to make it through the worst day of their lives. Now picture that same room turning into a fist fight right next to the body. Start in San Francisco at the goodbye for a young person named Banco Brown.
Yeah, and emotions were high during that ceremony, boiling over at one point. As you can see, people started shouting at one another. Some began shoving each other. One person had to be held back. It lasted a few minutes, but eventually things calmed down and the service resumed.
You would think that kind of thing only happens once in a blue moon, but the sad truth is that it keeps happening over and over. And today we are showing you 3 separate times a sacred goodbye went completely left. Some of it is grief, some of it is old family beef that never got settled, and some of it is straight-up pride, but all of it will leave your mouth open. That right there is just your first taste of what we are dealing with. Now here is a woman leaning over an open casket to kiss the man she loved one last time, and watch what the family does to her the very second her lips get close to his face.
Uh-oh, no, 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 no. She fighting, they fighting.
And this right here is a grieving mother who grabbed the mic at her own son's service and told the whole church exactly what she did to keep that boy fed and clothed in front of God and everybody, holding nothing back.
Son, I prostituted and sold drugs, so my son could have everything he wanted.
We even have a bishop up in Brooklyn who got physical with a woman right in the middle of his own live-streamed sermon. And we are going to get all the way into the man they call the Bling Bishop and how he went from the pulpit to a jail cell in the same afternoon. But before we get into the bishop's story, let us start with this one, because it might be the saddest of them all. His name was Joshua Allen, and if you were watching television back in 2008, you already know his face, even if you cannot place the name right away. Joshua was a kid from Fort Worth, Texas, who could move his body like almost nobody else alive, and he took all of that talent and won a whole season of a hit national show in front of the entire country. Years later, that same gifted man ended up walking down a set of train tracks in the dark, and the way he left this world broke a whole lot of hearts. Then his funeral turned into the exact kind of chaos we are talking about today, with his girlfriend throwing hands with his mama's side of the family right over his body. His life is a reminder that the brightest talent in the world cannot protect you from the pain you carry on the inside, and his ending left a whole community searching for answers. So let us back all the way up and tell you how a golden boy from Texas ended up on those tracks in the dark. Joshua Demon Allen was born on March 13, 1989 in Fort Worth, Texas, and he came up in that city dancing from the time he was a little kid running around the house. He started around age 8, looked up to Michael Jackson, learned the moonwalk, and even performed as a child at Fort Worth's Bass Hall, all while also playing football and running track like any other Texas boy. Dancing was always the thing that set him apart, though, and when he was still a teenager, he auditioned for So You Think You Can Dance in Dallas alongside his longtime friend Comfort Fidoke, a girl he had known since their middle school days on the local dance scene. He walked into that audition as a raw hip-hop dancer, going up against people who had been trained in every polished style you can name, and against all of that, he still came out on top. On August 7, 2008, at just 18 years old, Joshua won the entire season and took home a prize of $250,000, beating out the runner-up, a dancer the whole world would later come to love as Stephen "Twitch" Boss.
The winner of So You Think You Can Dance 2008 is... Joshua.
His old high school back in Fort Worth was so proud of their hometown kid that they threw an actual parade in his honor. For a young black man from Texas with big dreams, this was everything, the kind of moment whole families stay up praying for. But even that beautiful high point came wrapped in pain, because just 2 days before he left for Los Angeles, his 13-year-old cousin was shot and killed back in Fort Worth. And his audition happened to air around the same time that cousin died. So from the very jump, joy and grief were tangled up together for this young man, and that pattern honestly followed him for the rest of his life. After the show, Hollywood opened its doors wide. Joshua appeared in Step Up 3D in 2010, the Footloose remake in 2011, and popped up in shows like American Horror Story and Community. He came back to the show that made him famous as an all-star, and later he spent a lot of his time teaching and mentoring young dancers at conventions and workshops around the country, giving back the same gift somebody once handed to him. His friend, Comfort, who watched him grow up in this brutal business, remembered him as someone with real heart and who was carrying a load most people never saw. In her tribute, she called him someone who had such a kind heart, even though you were so often misunderstood. And she admitted that the cards he was dealt sometimes put him in tough spots. That's a gentle way of saying his life was not all parades and prize money, because behind every performance, this man was carrying grief that most people would have buckled under. Another friend and fellow choreographer, Emmanuel Hurd, remembered him as one of the realest people he ever met and the life of every party, someone who didn't always do things the way everybody thought he should, but who kept it 100 every single time. That kind of realness is exactly why people loved him, and it's also part of what made his story so heavy, because the very stage that made him famous kept taking people from him. The clearest example of that is the man he beat for the title. Stephen "Twitch" Boss, the runner-up who lost to Joshua on that show back in 2008, went on to become a household name of his own before he tragically took his own life in 2022. Joshua publicly mourned him and carried that loss with him, and there's something almost impossible to sit with about the fact that two young black men who danced their way onto the very same stage would both end up leaving this world the exact same way.
His family later said that in one of his last real conversations, Joshua talked about keeping God first at all times and about being real with yourself before you can be real with anybody else, which tells you the kind of things that were sitting heavy on his mind near the end. Watch how his own family remembered his run on the show at his funeral, because even in their grief, they wanted the world to know just how special he really was.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming out and helping us celebrate my nephew's life. He lived a full life. I tell you what, when he won So You Think You Can Dance, I thought all Joshua knew how to do was hip-hop things. But he showed me he could waltz, he could dance from other countries, Bollywood, yeah, sister got it. Pepito's story, he could act, he could sing, multi-talented young man. But I tell you what, the apple don't fall too far from the tree.
While Joshua was still a familiar face from television, he ran into serious trouble out in Los Angeles that had nothing to do with dancing, and it is the kind of trouble we cannot skip past. Back in January of 2016, he was convicted of a misdemeanor for hurting a girlfriend, and a protective order was put in place telling him to stay away from her. That order did not slow him down the way it was supposed to. Prosecutors say that in April of that same year, he assaulted and choked that same woman, and then, while he was already facing charges for that April attack, he went after her one more time in June. That June situation got ugly in public for everybody to see. The woman ran into a nearby coffee shop trying to get away from him, and Joshua chased her right inside, threw a glass vase at another woman who tried to help, attacked a man who stepped in, and tore up the shop until regular people had to physically hold him down. The Los Angeles County District Attorney then charged him with 2 felony counts of hurting a girlfriend after a prior conviction, plus a felony assault with a deadly weapon and a handful of smaller charges, and he was staring down more than 10 years behind bars. In August of 2017, he pleaded no contest to a felony count of injuring a girlfriend and a felony assault with a deadly weapon, and a judge handed him 1 year in county jail, 5 years of probation, 52 weeks of domestic violence counseling, and a 10-year order to stay away from the people he hurt. By some accounts, he broke all the way down and wept in that courtroom when the sentence came down. After all of that, Joshua moved back home to Fort Worth around 2020, out of the Hollywood spotlight and back to the streets where he started. And this is where a woman named Dizetta Brown comes into the picture, because she says she loved him through the hardest stretch of his entire life. Brown says the two of them were together for nearly 4 years and had been living together for about a year, and she flat out rejected everybody calling her his ex. She called him the love of her life and said they had sat around talking about marriage, kids, buying a home, and traveling the world together. She also made clear that even after his arrest over the summer split them up for a minute, he told her he wanted to come home, that they stayed in communication, and that she believed he was really trying to work on himself. She was also honest about the fact that things were not always smooth between them. The one real stretch where they were apart came after that summer arrest in 2025, and even during that separation, Brown says the lines of communication stayed open because he kept telling her he wanted to come back home and put in the work. In her telling, this was not a couple that had broken up and moved on, but 2 people trying to hold a relationship together while one of them was drowning. That is a big reason she took the ex-girlfriend label so personally later on, because from where she stood, she never stopped being his partner, and she never stopped fighting for him, even when fighting for him meant fighting the very people who were supposed to be helping. But Brown also says she watched something quietly break inside him. She noticed signs during their second year together, like intense attachment, jealousy, and paranoia, and she says she tried everything she could think of to get him real help. His own father, Eddie Powell, backed that up completely and confirmed his son was battling mental health struggles before he died. And this is the heartbreaking part, because according to Brown, every single time she reached out for help, the only thing the system ever offered her back was a jail cell. She told reporters that she begged law enforcement to help him with his mental health instead of arresting him, and nobody listened. There was a 90-day emergency protective order against him that ran from July until September 22nd of 2025, tied to those mental health incidents, and Brown says she had no control over that decision at all. Then, just 3 days before his death, she says she called his probation officer, told the woman she was scared, and the answer she got back was to record him so they could send him right back to jail. She saw that as the whole system choosing punishment over the treatment he actually needed. By the time that final year rolled around, Joshua was living under real legal weight that never let up. He was still on the kind of supervision that follows you everywhere, and the autopsy would later confirm he was wearing a black ankle monitor when he died, which lines up with the probation situation Brown kept describing. Early reporting even described him at one point in terms that suggested he did not have stable housing. So this was a man who had gone from winning a national show and a $250,000 prize to living with a monitor strapped to his leg and a partner scared of what might happen next. When you stack it all together, the fame, the losses, the domestic violence history, the untreated mental health struggles, the drugs in his system, and a system that kept answering cries for help with handcuffs, you start to see how a person can end up walking down a set of tracks at 1 in the morning with his phone in his hand. Then came September 30th of 2025, around 1 o'clock in the morning, and everything ended. Joshua was out on the railroad tracks near Millbrook Lane and Nuffield Lane in South Fort Worth. According to the police report and a 911 call obtained by the U.S. Sun, the train conductors first spotted him from about 200 feet away, walking toward the oncoming train while holding up his phone and recording it. They blew the horn again and again to try to get his attention, but he kept walking straight toward it until he was struck, and they said there was no way they could stop in time. The caller described him simply as a man in a tan shirt recording on his phone while walking toward the train. He was rushed to a hospital, and he did not make it.
So You Think You Can Dance winner Joshua Allen has died at just 36 years old. The reality competition champ passed away on September 30th in Texas, with a family member telling TMZ that Allen was struck by a train. Police told the Fort Worth Star-Telegraph that authorities found a man near railroad tracks around 1 a.m., and he was later pronounced dead after being taken to a nearby hospital. The investigation reportedly remains ongoing. County medical records confirm Allen died in a Fort Worth emergency room at 1:29 a.m. An official cause and manner of death were not immediately made public. Allen won So You Think You Can Dance Season 4 in 2008 and went on to appear in American Horror Story, Footloose, and Step Up 3D. He spent a year in jail after pleading no contest to domestic violence charges in 2016. His last Instagram post was in honor of late Cosby Show star Malcolm Jamal Warner, who accidentally drowned in July on a family trip to Costa Rica.
Months later, in March of 2026, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner ruled that he took his own life, with the cause listed as blunt force injuries. The autopsy also showed alcohol, cocaine, and ketamine in his system, and noted that he was wearing a black ankle monitor at the time. He was only 36 years old. And here is a detail that makes it even heavier, because his old friend and rival, Twitch boss, had also taken his own life just a few years earlier in 2022, and Joshua had publicly mourned him.
Allen previously paid tribute to fellow So You Think You Can Dance alum Stephen Twitch Boss after the 40-year-old's December 2022 suicide, recalling how they bonded early on, writing in part at the time, "I remember when we first met in Vegas for So You Think You Can Dance, and we were sitting on the stairs getting ready to audition, chatting about how nervous but hungry we were to get on the show and change the game. I knew from the beginning you'd do that. You've inspired me from day one as well as so many others around the world." Twitch was Allen's runner-up on their season of the hit Fox series, and choreographer Emmanuel Hurd, a friend to both dancers, shared sorrow for Allen's loss in a heartfelt Instagram post, writing, "This one hurts deep. I know you're with Stephen now, and that brings me comfort."
Two young black men who danced their way onto the same stage, both gone the same tragic way. His homegoing was set for Saturday, November 8th, 2025, at Beth Eden Baptist Church in Fort Worth, with a wake the night before and a burial to follow. And loved ones even set up a fundraiser to cover the costs of sending him off right. It was an open casket service, and it should have been a day for nothing but peace and prayer. Instead, it turned into the fight that everybody online is still arguing about to this day, because Dezetta Brown walked up to that casket to say her final goodbye, and the whole room exploded. Before we even get to the fight, understand what this day was supposed to be. The family had put together a whole homegoing, with a wake the night before and the main service that Saturday afternoon, and loved ones had raised money just to give him a proper send-off after such a sudden loss. For Dezetta Brown, this was not some random funeral she was crashing. This was the man she called her soulmate, the person she planned to marry and build a life with. And the date of that service, November 8th, happened to land right on the 1-year anniversary of the two of them living together. So imagine carrying that specific kind of heartbreak into a room and still believing you have every right to be there because you were told you did. Brown says she had been invited by family and given permission to be there, and Joshua's father tells the exact same story. Watch the way Eddie Powell laid out what happened, because he put the blame directly on his son's mother's side of the family.
No arrests or citations were made. Joshua's father, Eddie Powell, tells TMZ the woman seen in the clip was Joshua's girlfriend, who had been trying to leave a note and kiss him goodbye. Powell says members of Joshua's mother, Angela Talbot's side of the family, attacked her, despite allegedly giving her permission to attend. She came in peace, Powell said. She showed nothing but grace, patience, and love.
So, according to the father, Brown stepped up to that open casket, placed a note on Joshua's chest, and leaned in to kiss him one last time. That is the exact moment a woman came up behind her and snatched her, and the whole room turned upside down. One channel covering the story described the woman who grabbed her as an aunt on Joshua's mother's side of the family. Look how fast the calm in that room shattered into chaos.
Uh-oh, no, 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 no. She fight, they fight.
And this was not something that came out of nowhere either, because there was tension boiling outside and around that service long before the grab happened, with the maternal side making it crystal clear they did not want Brown anywhere near the body. You can hear it in their own voices as they talk about that old restraining order and what they wanted to do about her being there.
Show them the paper what to do. That's right. We are a threat to her.
Well, she shouldn't be here.
She should not be here.
No, you don't. Don't you come and apologize. You don't even know who she was.
You make the whoop my butt like I say.
No.
She ain't got to go to jail. We'll get an alley, baby. You know your alley.
You want me to sit in there and look at her?
Eddie Powell kept calling Brown his son's heart and stressing that she had been the one trying to get Joshua real mental health treatment before the police ever got involved, which is exactly why he could not understand her being treated like an enemy at the casket. The Fort Worth Police Department confirmed that officers were actually called out to that funeral twice in one day over what they called an unwelcome guest. According to the department, the first call came in around 1:27 in the afternoon about someone certain people did not want on the scene, and a second call came more than an hour later, around 2:53, from a third party who wasn't even there, so officers ended up posting inside until the whole service was over. And after all of that drama, nobody got arrested and nobody got a single citation. Brown says the maternal relatives brought up her old restraining order when police first showed up, but the officers let her stay, so she went back to her seat, gave the family their space to grieve, and only later walked back up to that casket, which is the moment the grab happened. Now, the family is split right down the middle over what really went on that day. Powell was so shaken by what he saw that he left the funeral early and did not stay for the rest. But even in her grief, the aunt who spoke at the service actually got up in front of everybody and asked the whole church to forgive her, admitting she was not in her right frame of mind. Listen to her try to explain herself.
I am going to ask everyone in the church forgiveness of me. Everybody called me the mean. I just act on my emotions. Y'all forgive me for my actions today, but I am in a very emotional state of mind. gonna miss my man.
When you step all the way back and look at this whole thing, it is a real gut punch. Here's a woman who says she spent years trying to get the man she loved into treatment, only to catch hands at his casket from the very family she says she invited her in the first place. And here's a family so torn up over losing Joshua that they could not hold it together long enough to bury him in peace. Brown said it best when she made clear she was never the reason for his pain, telling reporters that the system failed him and failed her, while she remembered him as kind and talented with so much left to give the world. Part of what kept this story spinning online was the fight over who Brown even was, because some relatives and commenters kept calling her an ex-girlfriend, while she and Powell both pushed back hard and insisted she was her current partner right up until the day he died. That argument might sound small, but it sits at the whole heart of the funeral drama. Because if she was family, then she had every right to that casket. And if she was some ex who had a restraining order in the past, then the maternal side felt she had no business leaning over his body at all. Both sides dug in, and the internet picked teams, and a young man who deserved a quiet goodbye became the center of a debate nobody could settle. What gets lost in all that noise is the simplest thing of all, which is that everybody in that room, the girlfriend and the mother's side alike, had just lost somebody they loved, and grief that deep almost never comes out clean. Rest in peace to Joshua Allen, a man who gave the world so much joy through movement and still could not find enough peace for his own heart. That is our first goodbye gone wrong, and it lives in the world of fame and Hollywood pressure. Our second one is a completely different kind of pain, because it did not come from a stage or a spotlight at all. It came from a small South Carolina town, a late night at a bar, and a best friend with a gun. And the mother left behind decided she was going to say her piece at that funeral, no matter who in the building it made uncomfortable. Meet Starquan Washington, a young man from Longs, South Carolina, who everybody in his life describes the exact same way, as a bright light that just could not be dimmed. He was born on July 28, 2000, in the Myrtle Beach area, and his family had moved back to that part of South Carolina from Florida when he was young. He went to Socastee High School, worked laying asphalt and concrete at a company called Haytop Enterprises, and loved fishing and going to the shooting range in his free time. Most importantly, he was a father to a young son, and the people around him say he was the kind of person who would give you the shirt off his own back without thinking twice about it. Watch how his loved ones remembered his heart after he was gone.
Is that Starquan was a forgiver. His heart was so pure. And even in the last days, his last moments, he still forgave.
Always kept a smile on his face.
Always.
His cousin Christopher Glenn told a beautiful story about how the two of them met in a high school gym class as strangers, and only later found out they were actually blood relatives. And that discovery turned a regular friendship into a real brotherhood.
Hanging out and seeing each other all the time, he was around my family, and then come to find out he was actually related to me, being one of my cousins. But then after all of that, basically we've grown from a bond from being cousins to brothers. You know, Starquan was always my brother. From the moment I met him, I knew he would be my brother, and Starquan was always there.
Starquan came from a big, tight family. He was the first of 5 children born to his mother, Jamela Chantel Washington, a woman who has said she got pregnant with him young, and that little boy brightened up her entire world. He grew up surrounded by sisters, grandmothers, aunts, and cousins, all living close by in the Myrtle Beach and Longs area. And his aunt Cassandra Struthers described him as a forgiver with a pure heart, who always kept a smile on his face no matter what he was going through. The family did not pretend he was perfect, and they would tell you he did his dirt sometimes, like anybody, but the word that came up again and again about him was good, a genuinely good and loving person to everybody closest to him. His name was Star, and the people who loved him swear that name matched exactly who he was. That kind of warmth is exactly why what happened to him is so hard to sit with. In the early morning hours of October 18, 2023, around 2 in the morning, Starquan was shot outside Barfield's Bar and Grill off Highway 17 near Myrtle Beach.
He was one of 2 people shot that night, and he was rushed to Grand Strand Hospital, where he later died from his injuries, while the second person hurt survived. He had spent the night before over at Christopher Glenn's house and had actually invited his cousin to come out to the bar with him, but Glenn stayed home, and that what if is something this family has had to carry ever since. Glenn also shared that Starquan left behind a young son and had been interested in one day pursuing a career in psychology, which just makes the loss of all that potential sting even more. What makes the loss even harder for this family is the pile of what-ifs sitting on top of it. Starquan had invited his cousin Christopher Glenn out to that bar the night he died, and Glenn stayed home. So the family has spent every day wondering how things might have gone if he had ridden along. On top of that, this was a young father with a whole future mapped out in his head, a man who talked about going into psychology one day and helping people work through their own struggles. All of that potential ended in a parking lot before the sun came up, and the person accused of ending it was not an enemy at all. The man arrested for the shooting was not a stranger and was not some rival. Police charged 24-year-old Kayvon Lawhorn of Myrtle Beach, and Starquan's own family said the 2 of them were longtime friends, best friends even, going back around 10 years.
Everybody not your friend.
Strong words tonight from Starquan Washington's loved ones, who claimed the 23-year-old's own best friend murdered him last week in cold blood. Horry County Police arrested 24-year-old Kayvon Lawhorn hours after the incident, claiming he gunned Washington down outside of Barfield's Bar and Grill right off of Highway 17.
As for what actually kicked off the shooting, police have said an altercation broke out near the bar, with about 4 people involved in the overall confrontation, and the owner of the neighboring Clockers Tavern told reporters he heard fighting outside followed by the gunshots. Both Barfields and Clockers were closed or closing at the time, and this was the tail end of a long night, with reporting noting that Lawhorn and one of the victims had been drinking, while the second victim had not. Horry County Police arrived within about 4 minutes of being dispatched, but by then the damage was already done, and the coroner's office soon confirmed that Starquan had died from gunshot injuries. The second person hit that night was never publicly named, but survived.
Horry County Police arrested 24-year-old Kayvon Lawhorn early this morning, hours after they say he shot and killed one man and hurt another here in this parking lot here right next to me outside of Barfield's Bar and Grill. Now, nearby businesses here tell me they just want to, the situation is actually all too familiar for them.
It's sad. I have grandkids. I don't want them growing up like that. You know, it's scary.
Jill Sorrell started her workday this morning by cleaning up from the aftermath of a shooting. It was a painful experience for her, but also one she tells me she's been through before.
This is the second time now I've got to clean blood off of, the last time was my door.
Records show a large fight outside Barfield's and Clockers Tavern boiled over into gunshots in January. More than half a year after this morning's shooting killed 23-year-old Starquan Washington and hurt another person. Clockers management tells me they've recognized how problematic the violence has become, and they've already made changes to their business model.
So over the past 6 months, we've actually banned over 20 individuals that have either been a problem in this bar or other bars in the area. We've gone ahead and we've been preventative.
It's still unclear what led up to this most recent incident, but it's important to note the parking lot does have a history of violence. I'm told that violence still has some employees at nearby businesses afraid to come into work.
Lawhorn was booked into the J. Reuben Long Detention Center on charges of murder, attempted murder, and possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and a judge denied him any bond the very next day. And the details that came out about that bar were honestly wild. Surveillance video reportedly showed a bartender pulling a gun out of his own waistband and handing it right to Lawhorn because he was a regular patron and the staff there routinely held his firearm while he was inside the building. The gun believed to have been used in the shooting was later found in a brushy area behind the bar where surveillance showed the suspect tossing a firearm. That whole setup, a bar casually holding a regular customer's loaded gun and passing it back at the end of the night, is exactly the kind of thing that turns a bad argument into a funeral. This was not Lawhorn's first run-in with the law either, because back in 2018, he was one of several teens arrested in a robbery case, though he ended up sentenced under a youthful offender program to no more than 1 year on a single count of unlawfully carrying a pistol. So there was already a history there, and yet the bar still treated his gun like a coat to check at the door. But the case took a turn that absolutely gutted this family. At a preliminary hearing on January 11, 2024, a magistrate judge reduced that murder charge all the way down to involuntary manslaughter after deciding the shooting was accidental and happened without malice. Starquan's aunt, Cassandra Struthers, spoke for the family and said they did not understand the reduction at all and felt the facts of the case spoke for themselves. After that reduction went through, Lawhorn's bond was set at $50,000 and he was released to home detention in early February of 2024. Then, on October 29, 2025, he pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and received the maximum of 5 years, with credit for the time he had already served both in jail and on home detention. Some in the family called it a small step toward closure, while others said 5 years was nowhere near enough for the whole life that was taken.
Tonight, to a half-decade prison stint ahead for the man behind a deadly 2023 shooting outside a now shuttered Grand Strand bar.
It was a tragedy.
Starquan Washington's family still mourning their loss 2 years later, while facing their loved one's now admitted killer in court.
My son was a good kid. He did not deserve this tragic loss. I wish this on no parent.
Well, Lawhorn once faced a murder charge over the deadly 2023 shooting. Authorities later downgraded that count to the charge he ended up pleading guilty to, involuntary manslaughter, ultimately ruling the gunfire an accident. That's something that hasn't sat right with Washington's relatives.
If you saw the evidence video, it was a tragedy.
Who filed a still undecided wrongful death lawsuit over the shooting in September of 2024, and who are now expressing their displeasure with Lawhorn's sentencing.
I wish he would be in jail longer than 5 years.
And while Washington's family has floated the idea of pushing for change in Colombia following Starquan's death,
I believe that we need to talk about alcohol and guns, mixing them. If there are already laws, we need to strengthen them, follow them, tighten them, obey them.
Ryan Lagatuda says Lawhorn's sentence marks a step towards closure for her as she copes with the loss of a life taken far too soon.
I just hope for our family that we'll be all right. My daughter's doing a beautiful job raising him, the little boy, and we just want everybody to be okay. And this kind of closes one chapter anyway.
Now we get to the funeral, because Starquan's homegoing is where this story went viral, and it had nothing to do with a fistfight over the casket. It was his mother, Jamela Washington, standing up at the front of the church and flat out refusing to let certain people play the grieving family for the cameras when she said they were nowhere to be found while her son was actually alive. His service was held on October 27, 2023 at New Direction Worship Center in Loris, South Carolina, and the whole community came out to walk him home, with the family even organizing an honor walk through his hometown, using their own grief to beg other young people to put the guns down. Listen to the raw pain in that plea.
Washington's loved ones laid him to rest today in a ceremony that included an honor walk, where they marched across his hometown of Longs, urging other people to put their guns down.
How many deaths do we have to have for you guys to realize what is going on in Horry County?
That honor walk was about more than one young man, too, because his people were using their loss to send a message to a whole community that keeps burying its children. When a grieving family stands in the street and asks how many more deaths it is going to take before people put their guns down, that is not a talking point. That is exhaustion. They had watched a good kid get taken by somebody who was supposed to be his brother, and they refused to let his death just fade into another statistic on the local news. Inside that church, though, his mother took things somewhere nobody in that building saw coming. From the jump, she was making it known this was her day to grieve her son, and she did not want to be touched or told what to do.
It's a time for him to grieve for me and help me. I'm his baby mama, not her. And you know it's wrong. Don't y'all touch me. This is my son. You got the cameras rolling, Lamor? Yes, all right. It's going to be a church today. You know what you did and it was wrong. You know what you did and it was wrong. You were wrong. I don't want to hear it. They know where the fuck to go. You know you was wrong this too. But you know what? The woman in me. Wait 1 second. The woman in me. The woman in me. I forgive you. You hear me, Miss Tootie? I forgive you. I know you don't. I know you don't. I know you don't. No, you ignorant. Because you told your son not to help you when I had my baby.
She started calling out family members and a stepfather figure who she says were simply not there for her boy over the years, and the room genuinely did not know how to hold what she was giving them. There's a moment where she wrestles out loud between her anger and her faith, and even in all that pain, she lands on forgiveness while she is still clearly hurting. Then she said the thing that lit the whole internet on fire because she wanted every person in that church to understand exactly what she sacrificed so that her son never had to go without a single thing.
And people look at me and they all judge me. You judge a person, don't stand in front of me, let me speak. They judge a person because I had to sell drugs, because I had to prostitute my body. But see, when you don't take care of the kids, this is what happens. Nigga, I thank you for helping me. You did a good job, thank you. I will say thank you to you. Yes, I will. But I want to know where the rest was at. Where the rest was at.
Even in the middle of all that fire, she still stopped to show gratitude, thanking the person who stepped up and bought her son's casket, which tells you she was tracking exactly who did and did not do right by her boy. The pastor eventually had to move the service forward and pour the whole room into prayer, trying to bring some peace back into a building that had just watched a mother pour out years of pain in a matter of minutes. That is a mother who just buried her firstborn child and decided she was completely done being quiet about who really showed up for him. Local coverage later reported that she called out a stepfather figure and his relatives who left the service, saying they had not been present or supportive during her son's life, and that her raw remarks spread all over social media in the days after. Her son was carried to his final rest with a horse and carriage leading the way, buried in his hometown, and even the way they sent him off felt like the community was trying to give him the honor they felt the justice system never fully did. You can hear people in that church trying to calm her down, trying to get her to take a seat, and she was simply not having it, because in her mind, this was the one day that belonged to her and her boy alone. It is messy and it is loud, but if you have ever lost somebody and felt like the wrong people showed up to cry the loudest at the service, then you understand every single word she was saying up there. And this story did not even end at the burial. Barfield's Bar and Grill shut its doors for good in early November of 2023, choosing to close down rather than fight a state effort to pull its alcohol licenses over a long documented history of violence at the location. That shared parking lot with the neighboring Clockers Tavern already had years of fights, assaults, and shots fired behind it, so this deadly night was the final straw. Then, in September of 2024, Starquan's estate filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Barfield's, the neighboring Clockers Tavern, and the security company, arguing that the bar took Lawhorn's gun, held it behind the counter, and then handed it right back to him before he walked out that door. The heart of that lawsuit is a simple, painful question, which is how a business could sit on a known gun all night, knowing that same customer had a record, and that the parking lot had a history of shootings, and then simply give the weapon back and let him walk out into a crowd. For the family, this was never just about one man pulling a trigger, but about all the people and places that made it easy for that trigger to ever get pulled in the first place. The security company named in that suit pushed back, saying its people were not even involved because it was only contracted for Barfield's, which had closed for the night, and that the shooting happened over in front of Clockers while its staff were off the clock. So even the civil side of this became its own fight over who was responsible, which is a fitting echo of the funeral itself, where the loudest arguments were about who really cared and who was just present.
When the guilty plea and 5-year sentence finally came down in 2025, the reactions inside the family stayed split, with the grandmother of Starquan's young son calling it a step towards some kind of closure, while other relatives felt 5 years could never be enough for the life they lost. His mother summed up who her son was in a way that really stays with you, remembering a young man who forgave people even when they did him wrong. That is 2 goodbyes now, both drenched in grief and family drama, one in the world of fame and one in a small Carolina town. Our third and final story is not about a funeral at all. It is about a house of worship that turned into a wrestling match on a live stream, led by a man who wore designer suits to the pulpit and let the world call him the Bling Bishop. His name is Lamor Whitehead, and to understand how a bishop ended up putting his hands on a woman during his own sermon, you have to understand the man himself first. Whitehead was born on April 30th, 1978 in Brooklyn, and he built a church called Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries in the Canarsie section of Brooklyn, starting from just a Bible study in his own home. He became famous less for his actual preaching and more for his lifestyle, rocking designer suits, heavy jewelry, and luxury cars, along with a very public friendship with New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who he called a mentor. But underneath all of that shine was a real rap sheet, because back in 2008, he was convicted in a huge identity theft scheme involving more than $2 million in fraud, and served around 5 years in prison before getting out in 2013. There is also a piece of his backstory he brings up constantly, which is his claim that his father was Arthur Miller, a respected Brooklyn businessman who died during a struggle with NYPD officers all the way back in 1978, a death that sparked protests across the city at the time. That story is a huge part of how Whitehead explains himself, and it's a big reason Mayor Adams took him under his wing, since Adams has talked about his own painful history with police. Here's the catch, though, because members of Arthur Miller's actual family have publicly disputed Whitehead's claim to be his son, pointing out the timeline doesn't add up, so even his origin story comes with an asterisk. Whatever the truth is, the anger he carries about the police is very real to him, and it colors everything. You also cannot tell this story without the beef he had online, because Whitehead swears the whole church incident was a setup. Right before it happened, he had filed defamation lawsuits against a couple of online personalities who he says called him a scammer, and he insists those same critics sent the women into his church to bait him. He even claimed to have extra security camera footage that would prove the woman charged towards his family, though the version everybody actually saw was the live stream angle that made him look like the aggressor. So, you have a man who feels attacked from every direction, by robbers, by bloggers, and by the police, all crashing together in one chaotic afternoon.
The other thing Whitehead points to over and over is a robbery. On July 24, 2022, during a live-streamed service, 3 masked men ran up in his church with guns and robbed him and his wife of jewelry he valued at more than $1 million, even pointing a gun near his baby daughter. That trauma, he says, is the key to understanding everything that came next. Because just under 2 months later, on September 18, 2022, another live stream at that same church turned into a scene the whole country ended up watching. A woman named Tarsha Howard, who was 47 at the time, came into the service, and police said she had been recording and approached the bishop in an antagonizing manner.
Yeah, come on up here. Come on up here. I'm gonna make you famous. Come on up here. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Woo! Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
And then, moments later, that same welcoming energy flipped completely, and he is grabbing her and yelling for people to drag her out of the building.
While they take pictures and they want to be on social media, take the pictures. 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 Okay, now go over here, grab her out, grab her out. Now you're gonna grab her out.
That was Bishop Lamor Whitehead at his church in Brooklyn, New York this past Sunday, where he was giving a sermon, and he says a woman who was being disruptive then walked up to him, and he said he felt threatened by this woman, he and his wife and his child. So part of this was captured on surveillance video. Let's take.
The two of them tell completely different stories about what really went down in that sanctuary. Howard said she was there researching a book on religious leadership in the black community, that ushers welcomed her in, that the bishop invited her forward himself, and that she simply started praying in tongues before he lunged and dragged her out by her hair with no warning or explanation. She showed reporters a scratch on her neck and said she was the real victim of an assault, not the aggressor. Whitehead sees the whole thing the exact opposite way, and at a press conference the next day, he claimed the women were sent by online critics to disrupt him.
Because they are following, and they were sent by some bloggers, some media bloggers that are trying to use what happened to me with the robbery to get their following up and to get their content up.
His main defense is that she turned around and came after his wife and infant, which flipped a switch on him because of that earlier armed robbery.
What you guys don't see on camera is that she started to walk back to leave, and then she spit back around. And she came back after my wife and my daughter. So I have my wife and my daughter, who's 10 months old, sitting there, and she came and said, and now you're a liar, going towards my wife. And that's when you seen her walk in front of me, going at my wife and my daughter, and I grabbed her. Everybody's saying that I choked her. How can you choke somebody from behind? I don't understand it. I never wrapped my arms around her neck. I have no fingernails, so they say that I scratched her. I don't have any fingernails. I never have fingernails. You can see I don't have fingernails.
He kept pushing back on the idea that he choked her, insisting it was only a grab from behind. When police finally sorted it all out, both of them were taken to the 69th precinct, but the outcome was completely lopsided. Howard was charged with trespassing and disrupting a religious service, a charge so rare the arraigning judge said he had not seen in over 20 years of practice, while Whitehead was released without any charges at all after about 2 hours. Whitehead was heated about being cuffed at all, and he turned all of that anger toward the police, saying they embarrassed him in front of his own congregation and dragging his father's death into it, while tying the whole thing to race in the bluntest way possible.
So I went from the pulpit to the cell for no reason. The New York Police Department failed me and failed my church. They failed me and failed my church. They were supposed to protect me, and they arrested me. If I was a priest, if I was a Caucasian priest, it would have never happened. If I was a rabbi, it would have never happened.
Now, here is where the Bling Bishop's whole shine finally cracked wide open, and it had nothing to do with that church scuffle at all. A few months later, in December of 2022, federal agents arrested Whitehead on charges of wire fraud, attempted extortion, and lying to investigators. Prosecutors said he took about $90,000 from one of his own parishioners, a hard-working single mother who handed over her retirement savings after he promised to help her buy a home, and instead he turned around and spent it on himself. A jury convicted him in March of 2024, and that June a federal judge sentenced him to 9 years in prison. The man who preached about turning his pain into purpose ended up doing the exact same thing he had done years before, taking money from people who trusted him. Only this time, no designer suit and no famous friend could save him.
$1 million in jewelry during a highly publicized robbery at his Brooklyn church. Now, the so-called Bling Bishop is also poised to lose his freedom. Lamor Whitehead facing decades in prison after a jury convicted him today on federal charges, including wire fraud and attempted extortion. Prosecutors say he ripped off a parishioner's retirement savings, and tonight her family is speaking for the first time to News 4's Chris Jose.
It's been an emotional roller coaster for the past 4 years.
Rashid Anderson relieved tonight following the conviction of Lamor Whitehead, better known as the Bling Bishop for his lavish lifestyle. A Manhattan federal jury today finding Whitehead guilty of defrauding a parishioner and trying to extort a businessman.
It's been a long time coming, and we're very happy to see that the verdict was guilty today.
Rashid's mother, Pauline Anderson, invested $90,000 of her retirement savings with Whitehead. Prosecutors said he spent the money on luxury goods at Louis Vuitton and Foot Locker, and even used Anderson's money to make his car payments. Rashid testified during the trial. You and your mother trusted this guy.
Yeah, we trusted him a lot.
Whitehead, no stranger to headlines. In July of 2022, he was robbed at gunpoint while delivering a sermon in Brooklyn. The $1 million jewelry heist caught on his church's live stream. 2 months ago, one of the men accused of the robbery killed by U.S. Marshals at a New Jersey hotel.
This was the guy that put the gun, have a gun pointed just like this in my wife's face, pointed just like this in my 8-month-old baby's face, and then had the gun to the back of my head as he ripped off my jewelry.
Whitehead not yet publicly commenting on his conviction, which also includes charges that he tried to force a Bronx businessman to lend him $500,000 while promising access to Mayor Adams. Whitehead claimed he knows the mayor on a personal level. The bishop going to social media after his arrest in December 2022.
Just because you was arrested doesn't make you guilty.
Jurors found Whitehead guilty of wire fraud, lying to the FBI, and attempted extortion. The trial lasting 2 weeks. Rashid had prayed for today's outcome.
I do want to give thanks to God because he was the one that, revealed the truth, and I was able to go up there. Everyone was able to go up there and speak their truth.
So there you have it. 3 stories about what happens when the very places that are supposed to hold us at our lowest moments turn into battlegrounds instead. Joshua Allen, a golden boy whose incredible talent could not outrun his pain, whose girlfriend caught hands at his casket from the very family she says invited her. Starquan Washington, a young father shot dead by a man his own family called a best friend, whose mother stood in church and told the entire world exactly what she gave up to raise him. And Lamor Whitehead, a bishop who dressed like a king and grabbed a praying woman on a live stream only to land in a federal cell for robbing his own flock. Different cities, different lives, but the same hard truth sitting underneath all of it, that the grief and pride and money can turn even the most sacred rooms into places nobody recognizes anymore. If there is one lesson tying all of this together, maybe it is simply this: the people we lose deserve peace on the way out, and the living deserve a little grace even when they are at their absolute worst. And if any of this touched a nerve for you, especially Joshua's story, please remember that reaching out for help is never a weakness, because his girlfriend spent years begging for it, and the system kept turning her away. And support is always out there for anybody quietly carrying too much. Rest in peace to Joshua Allen and to Starquan Washington. If you know somebody fighting a battle that nobody around them can see, do not wait for a funeral to show them how much you care. Drop a comment and tell us which of these 3 stories hit you the hardest, and share this with somebody who needs the reminder that we have to hold each other while we still can.